Welcome to this next edition of the Wisconsin Assembly Election 2020. This interview is with candidate Tim Miller. Tim, let's take just a couple of minutes here in the opening, and if you would give us a review of your background.
Thanks for having me here, Scott.
Absolutely.
Much appreciated. Appreciate this opportunity to give my side out there. My background, I'm a 27-year law enforcement veteran. I have been the chief of police in Stratford the last 4 years. Always wanted to be in law enforcement, and it's been a great choice, and I've done a lot of good things in my law enforcement career. So obviously when we start talking about law enforcement later on, I have strong opinions on a lot of things that are going on in this country right now. I have been married for 20 years, my wife Tirza. We have a great team together, raising our 3 teenagers right now. We've got 3, a 13-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 17-year-old. My family, my boys and my girl are very athletic, so we spend our time in a lot of gymnasiums and traveling the country playing sports. So this pandemic that we're in right now has put a hold on a lot of that stuff, and we're just getting back into it. My boys had a tournament this weekend, so it's kind of good to get back out on the court. My oldest son was a member of the Stratford basketball team that was 24-0 when things were stopped. So it had some pretty devastating effects on my family. We looked at our other hobbies. We're an outdoor family. We love to hunt and fish and spend time outdoors and camp and do all that stuff and get the dogs outside. We live out in the country, so we do everything we can to enjoy the outdoors. So that's basically us in a nutshell.
All right, well, great. Thanks for that little insight. Along with that background, could you tell us a little bit of how you think that background and your work experience prepare you to be a state representative?
I have always done my career and succeeded in my career as a law enforcement officer by being a listener. I listen to people. I listen to what their problems are, to what their concerns are, to what their hopes are, what their dreams are. I listen to what the positive things are going on in their life, and I utilize that in my career to help people. Either help them reach the goals they need, or to basically help them problem solve with the issues that they're having. So most people call the police when they're having problems or issues, and I think it's our role as law enforcement to help them problem solve. Maybe we can't always do it for them, but we can definitely assist them in whatever way that may be. I think that transitions over perfectly to serving as a representative in the Assembly. I think the main goal is to listen to people, listen to what their concerns are, problem solve with them, and then go and make it happen in Madison. I think it's a great transition. I never thought I would go into politics. I've enjoyed my career in law enforcement, and it's something I love to do, but I've been looking for that next phase in community service, as I like to look at it. I'm not looking for another career. I'm not looking for a job. I'm looking at the next phase in community service, and that's how I look at the transition from my current career into that as a politician.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that potential transition then. With everything that's kind of in the news right now, with a couple of main topics, what do you see as the most important issues facing the state of Wisconsin at this time?
Obviously, right now, COVID-19 is on the tips of everybody's tongues. I've watched it from afar. I've been a part of it. You know, when Governor Evers' orders first came out, shutting everything down, you look at the end of the orders, and this will be enforced by local law enforcement. Not only were we not provided a lot of information on how we were going to enforce this, it was just there was a lot of lack of information out there. We did a really good job in Marathon County. Sheriff Parks kind of kept all of us chiefs of police kept us all informed. And we worked together as a unit, worked together with the health department to work our way through the situation as best as we could. I think as we learned more information, I think we could have started opening up businesses a lot sooner. We could have started focusing on getting our economy back on track and getting jobs in there. I don't like the approach of just shutting the whole state down. a one-size-fits-all approach. I didn't agree with that. If they were having issues in Madison or Milwaukee or larger cities, let's focus on that there. And as new information came out about COVID-19, it changes from week to week.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one week don't wear masks, they don't do anything. The next week do wear masks, they do something. Now it's everybody wear masks. And I've heard there's a lot of flaws in the testing out there. There's a lot of flaws in how they make counts. It's getting through all that red tape to find out what the problem is, how do we solve it. I don't think we're going to be able to stop this thing. I think it's like any other virus. I think it's going to have to work its way through our population, work its way through our communities. And just like with influenza or any other disease that we have, there's going to be casualties, and that's sad and that's devastating, but we can't all just shut down our lives.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it with my kids, and I know a lot of people did, not being in school for all those months. I think it was a great learning experience for our kids. Our kids, you know, they grow up on social media these days. And I think a lot of them, well, I still got my social media. I saw my kids FaceTiming, I saw my kids doing stuff like that, but I still saw them going into a depression. Very happy, very active young people going into depression. And they were still seeing friends. They'd have a friend over to work on homework together or whatever, but that social contact with people in a school setting, being in that lunchroom when everybody's there and it's so loud and people are talking about who likes who and who doesn't like who and all that social connection, I think our kids really missed it. I'm hoping it doesn't have too many devastating effects. You know, I hear about this 10-year-old down in Baraboo that committed suicide.
Yeah.
A 10-year-old. I don't know what the circumstances are, but I saw what my kids went through. You know, we need to get our kids back in school. We need to get back into the flow of life and get the education system back up and running.
Okay. Are there any other, besides COVID, are there any other issues that you would say would rise to prominence at this point in time?
For me personally, being in law enforcement, I have seen a lot of issues with mental health. I think our mental health system really needs to be looked at. I think we need to look at finding ways to better help people with mental health issues. I've been in law enforcement for 27 years, like I said, and for all those 27 years, it's we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to change this, we need to change that. And I see a lot of people falling through the holes. Those are the people we deal with a lot in our line of work. And because the people don't get the help they need, I see them turning to substance abuse. So our mental health issues has a direct correlation to our substance abuse issues. If they're not getting the help they need from doctors, they self-medicate. And that's where we have a lot of our problems. And that's kind of a cause and effect situation where you have people that have mental health issues, now they're abusing substances, and then we wonder why we can't fill all the jobs around here.
Right.
We have I talk to a lot of business owners, and they say it's a tough time hiring people, and the ones that do show up aren't always reliable. I've talked to some business employers who say they hand somebody an application, and the first words out of their mouth is, "Do you drug test?"
Right.
And when the employer says yes, they just hand the application right back and walk out the door. And we need to figure out a way to get these people back into our arms, and you know, I think it needs to start with the mental health system. We need to look at, does it need to be reformed? Do we need to do something better with it?
Along that lines then, should you be elected, what would your legislative priorities be then down in Madison?
The mental health issue has always been strong with me, and substance abuse issue. I've been asked about a legalization of marijuana. I find it hard to believe to legalize another recreational drug that can cause havoc with our communities and families. People say, well, it's just marijuana. Well, the marijuana these days is nothing like the marijuana from the 60s and 70s and 80s. It's much more potent. It's much stronger. It's much more addictive. So it's not the same old marijuana. So I have trouble with that. I'm willing to listen to anything, like I said in the beginning. I'm willing to hear anything. And that's when it comes to the legalization of medicinal marijuana. I'm willing to listen. If you can show me and it's done right in the proper way, the way it's dispersed, I'm open.
Okay. That was a follow-up question I was going to have with regard to that, so you led right into that. Given priorities and such, you know, if you're elected, one of the first priorities that the legislature is going to have is the development of the next biennium budget. And so with that, what do you think are going to be the priorities that will drive that next budget?
The thing that people bring up the most with me are our roads. Marathon County, Clark County, especially out in those areas, the rural areas, there's a lot of complaints about the roads, and they are bad. You get a good vibrating jarring when you drive down some of even our state highways, so it's not just the back roads and stuff like that. I think we really need to look at how we can fix more of these roads. I'm going to say flat out, I'm against raising taxes. I've talked to enough people and they said there's enough fluff in the budget that we can look at, that we can work with and try to put more money towards our roads. We had a $600 million surplus this last budget. The Republicans wanted to give it back to taxpayers. Governor Evers wanted to give it to the schools, and neither side mentioned, what about the roads? You know, everybody's talking about the roads. I think that's one of the reasons Scott Walker got defeated, because of those billboards. They call them Scott holes. So there's no talk about that. It's all the talk is about what can we get from the federal government to fix these roads, when I think we can look in our own budget. So that's one of the priorities I think we need to look at.
We've talked about this a little bit before with regard to the coronavirus. Obviously, it's had a significant impact on the Wisconsin economy. And so as a state representative, what actions, if any, do you think the state legislature should pursue in aiding the economy to recovery?
I think a lot of communities are doing it already by providing grants to local businesses to help them get back on their feet, to help them pay their rent, to get their businesses up and running. I think we need to continue to look at that. I know even Marshfield here, they're giving out local grants to businesses to help them through that. I think we can look at that. We have to find where the money's going to come from, though. They're projecting possibly a $2 billion deficit this next budget cycle due to the taxes that aren't being taken in right now. And I've been asked before, you know, what do you think we should do about that potential budget deficit? And I looked at it this way: we had $600 million in the positive this last budget, so we're almost a third of the way there if we're making those right cuts. And we ultimately did not spend that money. So I'm glad we kept it in reserves. Now I think we need to look at how we can tighten the belt in other areas and allocate money. I've looked at the budget a little bit, and let me tell you this: it's a tremendous document. It's a huge document. It's a lot of numbers, and it's something that I need to really get into and look at further. If I'm elected, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, where is this money going? How are we spending this money? Can we allocate it and put it elsewhere where it's needed more? And that's what I plan on doing.
Okay. Next question then. What's your opinion of the State Assembly's action related to the state's approach in dealing with the coronavirus?
Well, I think the fact that we challenged Governor Evers and his stay-at-home order, and ultimately succeeded in having those orders overturned through the Wisconsin State Supreme Court, I think was the right thing to do. I think this one-size-fits-all approach, like I said earlier, is just not the proper way to handle it. And I think we could have looked at alternative ways to look over area by area, county by county, getting more information out. And I think that was the right thing to do. We were just at a breaking point before that ruling came out from the Supreme Court. I had businesses that said, I don't care what you do, we're opening back up. We can't survive another day. And I don't think any of those people were taken into consideration when we started learning more about the virus and its impact. And we needed to learn how these businesses could start opening back up. I think the whole making a determination of who's essential and who's not essential, I think that was a terrible way to tell your people, your businesses, well, you're essential, but you're not essential. That was wrong. And I think the actions that were taken to get the unconstitutional closures that we had in place struck down, and the Wisconsin Supreme Court sided with the Assembly on that.
I think in a follow-up to that, I have two follow-ups with that, and I think you've touched on them to some degree here. So if you were in the state assembly, would you be advocating for different actions?
Yeah, like I said, I think the one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. I think it needs to go county by county. We need to have that local control, and we need to have common sense about what's going on. And again, the governor put out these orders, and well, local law enforcement's going to enforce, and we had no seat at the table for that. We had no idea. He tried to help us out after the fact, and it was difficult. I think all the stakeholders need to have a seat at the table. And when you're at the county level, it's a lot easier to have everybody at the table.
Right. And then the last follow-up to that question is, and I think you've touched on that as well, are you in favor of statewide mandates?
I am not. And I just think my belief with what I've read and what I've researched, this virus is like other viruses that we've dealt with, and it's just like the flu. Not just like the flu season. It works its way through its population. We have deaths with the regular influenza A that went through this past year. I caught the influenza A this last year. I wanted to die. It was that bad. But it worked its way through its system. If I had underlying health problems, influenza A could have killed me.
Right.
And it does kill many people, but it has to work its way through the population like everything else. There's so many unknown things about COVID-19 and this particular virus, and I think that's what scares everybody. And unfortunately, I think the whole aspect of COVID-19 is being used politically right now. And that's the sad part, that our country's come to that, where we have such division in there that we use a disease that's killing people as a political tool. Mm-hmm.
Let's change topics here just a little bit then, and I think this plays very well into your background here in law enforcement. What's your opinion of the current calls and the protests regarding the race relations that are going on throughout the nation?
Let me put it this way. I had a meeting a week and a half ago with our Central Wisconsin Chiefs of Police Association, and I got up in front of everyone and I said, okay, I can say this, in 27 years in law enforcement, I have never been taught a police chokehold. And I asked, has anybody else here been taught a police chokehold? And none of the law enforcement chiefs had ever been taught that. I don't know what a police chokehold is. It's not a trained technique. What happened in Minnesota with that police officer there, and I hate even calling him a police officer, because what you saw was a murder. One man killing another man, kneeling on his neck. That is wrong on so many levels. Nothing there was done by the book. We are not taught to do that, especially a man that's in handcuffs. He's in custody, not going anywhere. And that officer willingly took that man's life. If that's what the facts say. I haven't seen the whole autopsy report and all that, but obviously it was a major contributing factor, and he should be charged to the fullest extent of the law. I can honestly say, in my 27 years in law enforcement, I have not experienced racism with the law enforcement officers that I've worked with. I spent a good part of my career down in southeastern Wisconsin working for a suburb of Milwaukee. I had friends in the Milwaukee Police Department. I had black officer friends, Hispanic officer friends in the Milwaukee Police Department, as much as I had white officer friends. And we always talked pretty openly about each other and the things that we experienced. And there was never any openly racist officers that I know. That's me personally. That's my experience. And I did work for a suburb, and I've spent most of my life prior to that in central Wisconsin, and I didn't experience anything as far as racism. I feel for a lot of these people out there that feel the need to protest and do what they're doing, there are some bad cops out there. No ifs, ands, or buts. And we need to do a better job in our line of work of weeding those bad apples out, those severely mentally ill people, if they think that way. Wisconsin has some of the most highly trained police officers in this nation. We are always looking to improve ourselves. We're always looking to learn from our mistakes. Most of the stuff that they're talking about with police reform, Wisconsin either already does or exceeds.
Right.
And the problem with that is our voices aren't being heard in this. You're seeing the media reports on it, and we should do this and we should do that. How often are you seeing local law enforcement interviewed by local media? And I've called some of them out on that. Come and talk to us. We'll tell you what we do. We're all for police reform. We reform all the time. If we were perfect, we would have been perfect 27 years ago when I started. I'm training 2 new officers right now, and I said to them, you know, every time I train new officers out of the academy, I try to learn from them. What new techniques are you being taught? I'm not above being able to be retrained. So I listen to how they're being trained. And we, unfortunately, but fortunately, have a lot of body cam and squad cam footage now. And the unfortunate part of that is we fortunately get to learn and see officers make a lot of mistakes. Some of them even losing their lives. And we try to learn from those mistakes. And that is what Wisconsin does. And I have gone to so much training in my 27 years. I've been blessed to be with departments, and I pass that on now with my officers. I try to get them to the training that they want, the best training that's available. And I've always been surprised at how many police officers from out of the state of Wisconsin are in Wisconsin getting training. And that's at all the different tech schools and all the different facilities that provide training. And when I was younger, I would ask them, what are you doing in Wisconsin? Oh, it's cool that you're here and everything. Oh, our chief knows a chief over here in Wisconsin, and they talk and they say this is the best place to get this type of training, or the best place to get this type of training. So I've been going to training in Wisconsin with people from out of state for decades now. Why else would they come here? You know, we're a leader in that. And I think part of our problem in law enforcement, we can settle for sitting in the shadows, and we let all this negativity about us go out there. And we're used to it. You know, law enforcement is used to taking the heat. You know, especially taking the heat for the few sometimes, because it certainly doesn't represent the many.
Right.
And I think we need to get our voice out there more. And I wish Governor Evers, I wish more leaders would bring us to the table and talk, show us talking together. These people in some of these cities, I mean, they're not seeing anything. You know, they want this reform, and they don't even know what we need to fix. And you know, that's kind of where I am in that. I mean, this is my career, this is my livelihood. I'm passionate about it. And if I ever had an officer that displayed any type of biases or prejudices, they certainly wouldn't work for me. I hire the best people available, and they better maintain that best person available, or they won't be working for me that long. And I don't know of any departments or leaders in departments. I have a lot of friends now that are chiefs of police, and we talk and we discuss this, and I don't know of anybody that would keep a bad officer on. I don't know the circumstances in Minnesota. From what I've heard, that officer should have been terminated a long time ago. They need to look inside and fix what their problem is. I know every department I've worked for, and the departments that I know and people that I know, if there's a bad officer, they try to fix it, especially if it's an officer displaying prejudices or you know, racist tendencies or something like that. You know, reforming law enforcement for years, since I got into law enforcement, we've been focusing on community policing. That's been a focus for the longest times. Now they're telling all these communities, like Madison just severed their contract with the police department, take the officers out of the schools. I don't think they realized why we were putting officers in the schools to begin with. I spent almost 7 years as a school resource officer. That was some of the best times of my career, being with kids, learning them, helping them get through issues, being a mentor, being a big brother, being a father figure to some of these kids. I told them the last thing I was here was to arrest kids. I hope I never have to arrest a kid here in the school. So we as law enforcement don't do a good job of getting our voice out there, and I think we need to do a better job of that.
I'm going to guess that you've got some strong opinions about some of these communities and groups that are calling for the abolition of police departments?
When all this was going on, especially over in New York, I thought to myself, when I was angry watching what I'm seeing, watching what these officers are going through, and I'm thinking, you know what, I wish every police officer in New York would come to Wisconsin for a week. Come and take a vacation, come and, go tubing,
Sure.
get out on the lake. We'll keep you here for a week and we'll see what happens to New York. And that was, the anger in me. And I quickly countered myself and go, not a darn one of them would do that, because when you get in this line of work, you get into it because you're dedicated to the service of the people. So, if these communities want to defund the police and get rid of the police, I don't know what their plans are. I'd certainly like to hear what their plans are. Sending social workers to domestic violence complaints, if they haven't checked at the statistics, domestic violence complaints are some of the most dangerous calls that we go to as law enforcement. More often than not, we become the enemy from both sides real quick. A lot of police officers have lost their lives at domestic violence complaints. So go ahead and try with the social workers. Our goal at every complaint is to go, like I said, go there, listen to the problem solve the issue, and come up with the best resolution. We don't go to every complaint going, I wonder who's going to get arrested here.
Sure.
That's a lot of paperwork.
Sure.
We don't like to have to arrest people if we don't have to.
Right. Let me ask you this as a last question before we move into the closing component here. As a state legislature, then, representative, what would the legislature's role be in addressing policing, police reform?
I think we all need to meet. I think legislators, and I've met with legislators before on different topics, and I like it when they sit down with us and they listen to what our concerns are and what we need to do. I don't think we have a voice right now as law enforcement, and I think we all need to get to the table together, because it's easy to sit and say, well, let's do this reform, let's do that reform, let's do this reform, and when you look through what they're talking about, Wisconsin exceeds or already does it. If there's something we can do better, we're open. I think this has to be a group discussion. And if there are officers that need to be removed from this line of work, remove them. Okay. One thing that we've talked about, we've been having difficulty hiring people for years now, probably a good decade. Not a lot of people are coming into this line of work. But one thing we've talked about as leaders of our police departments, we're never going to lower our standards just because we need people. And we need to stay strong on that. We need to keep our standards high. Wisconsin has high standards. We need to keep it that way. Whether you're a small department like me in Stratford, bigger department here in Marshfield, Milwaukee, Madison, whatever. We need to keep our standards high and continue to hire the right people. They're there. We just got to convince them that this is the best job for them. And I think people seeing us meeting with the legislators, sitting down with the governor, no matter what our political differences are, and talking and actually understanding each other. And right now that's not being done.
Okay. Let's, as we wrap this interview up, I want to give you a few moments here to make closing comments, and also tell people where they can find more information about your campaign and about you as a candidate.
I have a website, and that is millerforwisconsin.com. I have a Facebook page, and that's Miller for Wisconsin Assembly on Facebook. I put as much information out there as possible. Any interviews that I do or any endorsements that I have, I put on my Facebook and my website. People can also contribute to my campaign through those means. Email, phone number, that's all on there. Give me a call, shoot me an email. I answer everything. A lot of people get a hold of me through Facebook and message me. I just ordered a new batch of signs today. I got people asking all over, when's the signs coming, when's the signs coming? We already got the first batch out. I've been out for a week, and my wife was generous enough to drive and pick it up. One of them's a 4x8. I don't know how she got it in the car, but we got a big one going up on Highway 29 that people have asked me to put that up there. So we're gonna get that up there right next to the big Trump sign, so that'll look pretty good. As far as a closing comment from me, I think I've given a lot of my stance on what we got going on right now, other than what's going on with our history in our country right now. I'm proud to say I'm an American. And I think we have a tremendous history. Do we have bad things that happened in our past? Absolutely. Every country does. Every nation does. Especially a young nation like we were. And we went through a lot of growing pains. But that's what made us who we are today. Going through those growing pains is what made us who we are today. And to have people trying to erase our past is not the way to avoid making mistakes in the future. We need to remember what we went through as a country, what we went through together as a country. And I think a lot of people don't understand our history or refuse to look at what happened. It's easy to sit and say, well, they own slaves, they're all racist.
Mm-hmm.
Every country, just about every history. I'm a Christian, I like to read the Bible. Just about everybody in the Bible had slaves.
Mm-hmm.
They grew from that. We grew from that. You know, I hear people talk about the Europeans coming over here and conquering the Native Americans, and we took their land and how bad that was. I'm part Native American, and I absolutely love my heritage. I don't know a lot about it. My mom hid it from me. That was her choice. But I found out enough to have that pride. And I don't know how you fix that. You can't. You can't go back in history and change. That was the way of nations back then, conquering the weak and taking over their lands. If we did that nowadays, we're probably the #1 military powerhouse in this country. If we wanted to go start taking over countries and taking their land, we could. We choose it as a nation not to do that anymore. We learned from our mistakes. We're not going to do that anymore. So to try to erase our past, I think is a huge mistake. I love history. I love the history of our country. I watch the History Channel all the time, and they play the positives and the negatives. There's a lot of shows on Hitler, and we want to keep that fresh in our brain so we don't let that happen anymore. It's not that we want to agree with him. No, we don't idolize him on TV. We have shows about him on TV to show how damaged he was, how ignorant he was, because we don't want to repeat that. And what a major hand the United States had in bringing that man down and stopping that. So I'm saddened when I see statues coming down. I don't think these people are educated on what they're doing. They're just angry. And that's not the way to do things. In our country, we talk about it. If a statue needs to come down, let's talk about it. If that statue doesn't represent our values anymore, let's talk about it, let's remove it. I mean, I heard today the Washington Redskins are changing their name. For how many decades has the owner been saying, I'm not changing the name, I'm not changing the name. And because he had the right pressure put on him and they talked about it, he changed it. They didn't have to tear any statues down. They didn't have to go to the football stadium and riot. They didn't have to do any of that. He made the change because they talked, they discussed it. Didn't hurt that some of the businesses that put a lot of money into the team said they were going to cancel that, but still, it was talking, it was negotiation that did that. We don't need to just outright go and start tearing stuff down and causing damage and harming people and putting businesses out of business because we're damaging their inventory. Unfortunately, the riots overshadowed the protesters. You know, when I turn on the news and I see people running out of a liquor store with all the cases of beer and liquor bottles they can carry, I'm sorry, their message just got lost. That's how I feel about that. America's a flawed country, but it's a great country, and it can be anything that you want it to be if you want to participate in the process and not just try to force your hand. And that's why I'm here. I was angry with what I've been seeing in our country, and I know a lot of people sit on the couch and they continue to be angry. And I didn't want to be that person anymore. I want to do something about it. I want to be the voice of the people, the 69th Assembly. I want to help Wisconsin. I want to help this country and see where it goes from there. So I hope people hear my message and vote for me August 11th in the primary.
All right, great. Thank you, Tim. appreciate you taking time with us and letting us learn more about you as the candidate. I'm Scott Larson, again, president of the Marshfield Area Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and I've been your host for this edition of the Wisconsin Assembly 69th election 2020 candidate interviews, and this was an interview with candidate Tim Miller. And so with that, thank you. Thank you, Tim.
Scott. Thank you, Scott.